Do you think there are nefarious actors within the United States government working on experiments to replace your memories with possible fictional ones? Do you think there are nefarious actors within the United States government trying to build monsters that roam the country? If so, you're in the right place. This is Inverted World Live. Hey everybody, we are really glad to be here. Thank you for tuning in. I am Shane Cashman, your host. I'm joined by Alex.
Hey there, Shane. Hi everybody, I'm Alex. Good to see you.
It's great to be here. I'm very excited for today's show. We have a great guest. As many of you watching probably already understand, the official story is never the full story. And one of the great examples of that is the book Chaos, written by Tom O'Neill, where he makes the reader walk through the Tate LaBianca murders, questioning for themselves what exactly happened, because it seems as though the official story is not the full story, and there are many fractured, depraved elements that, with a lot of connecting parts to possible CIA operations, MK Ultra, which is mind control for those who don't know. So, you know, if you've read Chaos, I think it's a great example of making people question reality and what they believe to be the official story. So let's bring on Tom and talk to Tom, Mr. Tom O'Neill.
Tom, are you with us?
I think so. I hope so. Can you
Oh,
hear me?
yeah.
Hey, Tom.
Hey, Tom.
How you doing?
So thank you for being here, Tom. I really appreciate it. Chaos is one of my favorite books. I recommend it to everyone. You do a great job of breaking this down in a way that's digestible for people who might not be, reading stuff from that world. And like we were saying earlier before we went live, you build the narrative in a way where I think it's digestible for people who are not inclined to think about things that are happening in nefarious conspiracies, if you want to call it, within the government. And by chapter 6, one of my favorite quotes is you're talking about you were never interested in conspiracies. You never questioned things like the JFK assassination or the moon landing. And you say, for the first time, I saw the appeal of trafficking in murky secrets. And this is around the time of the book where the narrative flips into these darker experiments, whether it's nefarious actors who infiltrate subversive groups in the country, like the civil rights movement, and you build into things like the mind control experiments, MK Ultra. So if you weren't interested in conspiracies then, and now you've maybe tripped into this world where things are not what they seem with the Tate LaBianca murders, how has that affected the way you see reality now moving forward? Like, do you see certain stories get out, like these official stories, and is your gut reaction to question?
I actually still approach everything kind of as a devil's advocate.
Yep.
But I guess I'm easier to persuade now than I was before all this.
Right.
So I like to think I'm open-minded, but I'm still skeptical.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, that whole kind of that point of my reporting did kind of wake me up. I was a lot more naive, I think. I just didn't believe that there was a level of corruption beyond what I thought there was until then.
Yeah.
And so I'm more inclined to at least consider everything. Back then I wouldn't even think. I mean, when I moved out to LA, I can't remember if this is in the book or not, I seemed to encounter a lot more conspiracy minded people than I ever had when I lived in New York. Right. And it just seemed like such a cliche and boring and silly. And I would tell them, I don't want to talk about the Kennedy assassination. I'm sure, I just took the kind of mainstream narrative for granted. And I guess, I still have people talking to me about reptilian people living under the Earth's crust and things like that.
That's Shane's favorite topic.
Yeah. That's your next book. I'll get you down there soon enough. But speaking of evil, evil hiding amongst us. I think one of my takeaways from Chaos is just how evil someone like Bugliosi is, and that, for those who don't know, is the man who successfully prosecuted Manson. And he's a monster, as reported in your book. So like that must be something that changed the way you view everything.
Yeah, and before my experience with him became almost, I don't want to say I was a victim, but it got to be pretty psychologically abusive when he was threatening to make up these lies about me to damage me and stop my
Right.
book from being published. But prior to having that personal experience of him being awful, I'd heard from cops, and attorneys who had all worked on this case that he was crazy, and they said,
Right.
he's really nuts. And I'm like, you mean he's intense? He's really smart. They all gave him that. I go, but you mean he's intense and focused? They go, no, no, he is mentally ill.
Mm.
And then I found out, indeed, he was. When I find out what happened with the milkman's wife and his mistress, who he beat up, and the lies he told about them when they went public, and that predated his fame with the Manson case. So he
Yep.
was like that his whole life.
I
His
mean,
adult life.
violent, manipulative,
Yeah.
lying, stalker, dangerous man who
Yeah.
beat a woman, his mistress, into having a miscarriage. Stalked the milkman that he believed, I think, was cheating on having an affair with
He
his
believed
wife.
that the milkman was the father of his firstborn son.
Right. And this is all, yeah, like you said, this all predates the Manson stuff.
Well, the
Then that
mistress
leads up.
was the Virginia Cardwell mistress was after the trial.
Okay.
But the milkman episode was 2 years before, and he should have been arrested and prosecuted.
Yes.
He kidnapped the milkman's daughter, and actually, I don't know if that's in the book. I think I only found that out after the book came out.
I don't think it is,
The milkman's daughter got in touch with me, and he picked her up at school and took her to a toy store, told her she could buy whatever she wanted. She was like in first grade. And then he took her to the milkman's house, and he put all the gifts that he had bought her on the sidewalk in front of the house and dropped her off and waited for the parents to come out. And then he kind of waved at them and drove away.
Oof.
And I knew that the papers I did have that I had uncovered, there was something from the school saying, do not let anybody else pick her and her brother up from school. Only the parents can pick them up. They're not allowed to go on buses. I didn't know that was because he had already done this. I never knew that he had actually taken her, from the school and had her for a couple hours.
It's my biggest nightmare.
Yeah, I know. And he's an actual monster. And like I have documents to show like all these things that have happened with him. He made that one, I believe the mistress say something like it wasn't an abusive thing.
Yeah, he went to her after she had reported to the police that he beat her up. He went back the next day with his secretary and pretty much held her captive for hours until she agreed to go to the police and say she had filed a false report.
Right.
And
It's crazy. So when I read the Bugliosi parts of your book and I'm confronted with a monster, and I think Charlie Manson also a monster in different ways, but also many similar ways. But this guy's operating in the daylight like a buttoned up, more like a Ted Bundy type. He's existing.
That's a good comparison. I never thought of.
It's scary because he's like the antithesis to you in Chaos. He obviously, for those who've read the book, he threatens you with lawsuits. He's obviously, like you just said, threatens other people. For anyone who wants to subvert whatever narrative he's selling, and again, for those who don't know, he wrote Helter Skelter, which is one of the most widely purchased. It's a great best-selling book about his time with the Manson case, and it's won like an Edgar Award. But what I wanted to know from you is, it's interesting to me that he then went on to write books about like JFK assassination.
Well, that was his opus, whatever that was his life's work, the culmination. He was more proud of that than anything.
Right.
And it took him 20 some years to write it. But yeah, is your next question, do I believe that he had to do that book for someone else?
Well, I want to get there in a sec, but also just it's interesting to me that the person who becomes your basic, enemy is trying to discredit your narrative, which subverts his story, and then goes on to write a big book that discredits all conspiracies about JFK. And he does all these lectures, he does these interviews about it. And when you watch him speak, he looks like he's lying, in my opinion. His body language looks like he's lying. There's something about him that he seems compromised and like a liar. But when you see him doing that, are you thinking he's been told to write these things, to say these things? 'Cause it seems weird.
This is a theory, and I don't know again how much I say this in the book or not. I haven't read it in 5 years, but I believe he was given this case, which was, until the OJ trial, the biggest case in Los Angeles history, if not California, the United States, the biggest criminal trial. And he was given it as a young attorney. He was actually very successful, but he wasn't well known. He had done a double murder case that got a lot of press before it, but they knew what he had done with this milkman. I mean, he had gotten one of their DA's investigators to follow and basically report on the milkman's activities. And he lied and said that the reason that he assigned this investigator to the milkman was because he was a witness in a murder case. And then, like I said, he abducted the milkman's daughter from school. He was writing threatening notes. He should have lost his license. He should have been convicted. I believe that he was compromised, and Evel Younger, who was the district attorney who assigned him, ex-FBI, ex-OSS, really spooky guy. I believe that Bugliosi was told how to present that case and how to try it in a dishonest way. I mean, the right people went to prison, but not a lot. There were a lot more tentacles that were erased, and I think that was Bugliosi's job. And then the same thing 40 years later, or 50 years later, when he did his Kennedy assassination book, which, in his grandiose version was the book to end the conspiracies forever, that there was more than one gunman, that was Oswald acting alone.
Right.
I'm not an expert on the Kennedy assassination. In my book, I just keep it very narrowly focused to just Jack Ruby and how he was the investigation was compromised because a CIA doctor who was a mind control specialist got into his cell and caused him to have a nervous breakdown right before he testified to the Warren Commission. That's my only real knowledge, but I know who the writers are who present very valid cases, that there was a group that was behind this. And I've read their writings about Vince's book and Reclaiming History, and they demolish it. They show how he cherry-picked, how he ignored stuff. I mean, everything you're not supposed to do. When you're a prosecutor, you present a case that supports your case. But when you're writing a historic book that's supposed to be about the real truth, you can't do that there. You have to present it as objectively as possible. And some of the biggest complaints about my book is I don't have resolution. I don't definitively say things. And that's because I couldn't do that in fairness, because I couldn't prove everything. I can only show how things happen differently.
That's why I'm a big fan of your book, is because I'm usually skeptical. I'm skeptical of people who tell me that they definitively have the answer. I believe there's no resolution in life. Unfortunately, there's a lot of, you can find answers here and there, but these big stories, the digger you deep, the more mystery there is. And, when I look at the Bugliosi stuff, he's so adamant about these things that I'm like, well, now I think he's just trying to sell me a story. It's like, his book and his speeches that I've seen it's almost like a billboard for a false narrative that he's got to sell.